Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're really, really happy that you're here to talk about these things. And as Ash said, this workshop series was in sort of direct response to some stuff that's been happening in Asheville recently regarding state and police repression. Um, and as they said, this workshop is called Advanced Directives for State Repression, How to Make a Crisis Plan When Facing the State. And especially given, and well, as many of y'all know, and as I learned like fairly recently, an advanced directive is referring to a set of legal documents that sort of direct how you want medical decisions to be made in the event that you cannot make them for yourself. Originally, me and my colleague had adapted this idea onto sort of a state repression framework. So how do you want your support staff or your support team or your friends or your family to make decisions for you in the event that you're in state custody? But especially given the like events of the weekend, there's like a fairly horrific event that happened in Portland on the night of the 19th. We went back in and we sort of adapted a few points in this workshop to address the more sort of like health or medical aspect of this. It's not going to get too in depth with that information because we're not doctors or lawyers or anything like that, but we wanted to adapt that to sort of like address a need that we saw in the community. As you notice, our camera is off, and this is just because we don't want to center ourselves. We're not like scared or we're not like unwilling to show our faces, but we didn't want to center ourselves as personalities in this when like presenting this information. And in this workshop, we're hoping to provide a framework for how to logistically and emotionally deal with the often disorienting and frightening realities of state and police repression. Our goal is not sort of to provide an authoritative resource, though like if you want to use it as such, I guess I have no objection to that, but rather the hope is to present you with something that you can take back into your lives and adapt it or build onto it as sort of best fits your needs. Before we get into it, we're just going to introduce ourselves briefly and talk a little bit about what we as individuals are bringing to the table as people. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, all. Thanks for being here. My name is Isaac. I use he, him pronouns. I am a white trans Jewish anarchist, community care worker, and medic who has experienced state violence and have supported folks facing state repression before. I live with PTSD, which is something that has helped me inform some of the emotional first aid content of this workshop. And that's what I have to say.
Cool. My name's Amr. I use he and they pronouns interchangeably. I am a queer trans anarchist. I'm a mixed race person. My mother is from one of the like countries adjacent, she's like from one of the countries that they were talking about when they were talking about shithole countries. But it bears mentioning that I exist in like a pale skinned body. So sort of inflections of like, shall we say racism, like happen in my life in a way that's a little bit confusing or like just doesn't happen at all. And I think that bears mentioning. I'm an anarchist of probably like like 20 years or so.
Oh yeah.
Longevity, which is weird to say, but there it is. And yeah, I've just been around like doing various projects in the community for a while.
Hell yeah. So first things first, we're gonna go over our agenda. We did our introductions and we're gonna have a disclaimer. We are going to be defining crisis and safety plans and advanced directives. We are going to show some examples of the above. We are going to be going over why this is important. What does it look like to build a support team? What is actually on your plan? And at the end, we're going to go over some emotional first aid 101 and self-regulation techniques. And we'll finish out with the Q&A, which will be done through the DMs.
So here's our disclaimer. We and just as a note for anybody who's calling in or can't see the screen, we have a slideshow that's running currently, and we're going to be reading off each of the bulleted points on the slideshow. And where we have additional information, we're going to be giving that, but sometimes we will just be reading what's on the slide, just to be clear about that. So we will not be discussing any illegal activity here, and we ask that you do not discuss such. We'll also not be discussing any sort of open or ongoing court cases today. And that's for the reason of just community safety. We are not doctors, therapists, or lawyers. And it should be said that while we're not professionals as such, we believe we are all our own best experts in how we would want to receive care, and hold the belief that all of us are capable of providing one another support in sort of a wide spectrum of horizontal and multifaceted consent-based ways outside of perceived professionalism. It's probably best to not like take what we say as like legal or medical advice, though they are suggestions that we've like built up through sort of years of experience. We are community members, and this information, like I said just now, was compiled by us through shared years of experience in anarchist spaces and in communities. This is by no means a complete resource, though we hope it will create a springboard for further research. And it's our vague intention to make these slides available for y'all to use if you want in your own life, if you want to like do this, or adapt these slides and do this kind of workshop in your own scenes, like that's very welcome. But we have to figure out how to do that. So I guess I'll say no more about that for the time being, and we can figure out how to do that. All right, that's our disclaimer. Next slide.
Cool, thank you. So what is crisis planning and advanced directives? Crisis planning, in this case, is a set of contingency plans. As a set of contingency plans in the event of a crisis. In this case, the crisis would be getting arrested or imprisoned. Advanced directives would be how you, with the aid of a support team, engage logistically with the circumstance of arrest or imprisonment. It enables both you and your loved ones to navigate something otherwise very difficult with more ease and clarity, knowing what you are consenting to as far as the needs and kind of care you would want. So that's exactly what crisis planning is. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is pre-planning for crisis. And like Amr said before, advanced directives is commonly associated with a legal medical document that communicates how you would want medical decisions made upon your behalf if you were in a position that you would not be able to do so. But in this context, we're using the term advanced directives to mean how you would want to be supported, who would be supporting you, etc. It enables both you and your loved ones to navigate this. And like the slide says, it allows for that framework of consent to exist, which is important. An example of an advanced directive that some of you may already be aware of is the jail support form. A jail support form is a document you fill out before a protest or an action that helps the jail support team to know pertinent details relevant to how you would be booked, like your legal name and date of birth, what medications you may want if you're arrested, who needs to know what, and anything you may want post-release, for example. So I just wanted to offer that just like right off the bat, that a jail support form is exactly that, is an advanced directive. And that's primarily kind of what we're basing some of this off of, is a more in-depth jail support form. I also just wanted to say too that many of us already make contingency and safety plans on a daily basis, especially those who are targeted by fascist and state violence based on who we are.
Cool. So some common examples of an advanced directive are as follows. You wrote up some good notes about this. Is that right here?
It's like right,
Oh, awesome. Okay.
like right there.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, so it goes back a little.
Cool. First bullet point is living will, power of attorney, and medical advance directives. So a living will is a living document, so able to be edited at any time, that may include how a person would want medical decisions under circumstances in which they would not be able to express them, such as treatments, pain management, etc., as well as other pertinent logistical details and whether they would want to be buried, cremated, or otherwise in the event of death. Power of attorney is who you give the legal power of attorney is the person who you would trust to uphold your advance directives under circumstances that you would not be able to. And a medical advance directive, an example of that is a DNR, or do not resuscitate order. These documents, unfortunately, are required to be brought to a notary public to be held as a real legal document, in scare quotes, within the state of North Carolina. It's worth doing your own research around this if you live somewhere else, though I can't see it like being much different in other places. The second bullet point is emotional/mental health crisis planning, such as RAP or the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. We're going to be going through and giving you some like examples that you can see of these forms later in the workshop. The next bullet point is planning for domestic or intimate partner violence, which is an unfortunate reality that a lot of folks face. Natural and unnatural disasters. So as our world gets more naturally disastrous, we've already seen people do really amazing like hurricane support relief, like autonomous non-state hurricane support relief, which has been super badass. Like Isaac said, a jail support form, which a lot of y'all are probably familiar with. Some other contexts for an advance directive is losing a loved one, illness, relapse, potential eviction, interpersonal conflicts, and many other places where you could use this, and sort of anywhere where you're planning, not planning for, anywhere where you think you might be out of commission and you want people to know what you want to have happen. Cool. I think that's all for that slide.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you. So we have some visuals here. The first slide is an example of a living will template called the 5 wishes, which some people may be aware of already. On this slide, the 5 wishes are described as such. The first one is The person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't. The second is the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. The third one is how comfortable I want to be. The fourth one is how I want people to treat me. The fifth one is what I want my loved ones to know. And so this is just like a good template for some, um, for the context of the living will, or advanced medical directives. And on the slide we have here the wish number 3, which includes like different things that you may or may not agree with, like I don't want to be in pain, or I want to be clean, or like the kind of music that you may want. But we just wanted to provide this as an example of something that you can think about both in the context of planning around death, and also like borrowing some of these ideas and applying it elsewhere. Um, and also, I just wanted to name too that with these kinds of documents, they're especially relevant to individuals who do not want abusive biological, quote unquote, legal family members to have a say in the event of death or a medical emergency that would render one incapable of communicating their needs. So I definitely encourage y'all to look into what that looks like. And this next slide is an example of the legal advanced directive document in the state of so-called North Carolina, which we also included just so folks can see what that looks like. Like it continued, as this is a little bit more in that kind of dry legal narrative, but it's like, I do not want to receive, or I do or do not want to receive only artificial nutrition, for example. And other sort of things about like prolonging your life, and how you may or may not want to be buried or cremated. So this slide is one I'm particularly excited about because I think that it greatly overlaps with the content of this workshop. On the left here, we have the RAP plan, which is an acronym for Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And on the right is an adapted version of that, from the Fireweed Collective, formerly known as the Icarus Project. And this was actually the first example that I had made available to me of an example of an advanced directive. And some of the things on here are like, what are some of my early signs that I'm doing poorly? Or like, what are some signs that I'm doing well? What are, who are some people that I would want to be included in this process? Who are people that I definitely don't want included in this process? And yeah, like, I don't want to be brought to this facility. I'd rather be like at home with like my loved ones, that sort of thing. And at the end, it will be included, this template will be included in our resources so that you can have access to that. And this is just what it looks like. This is disaster preparedness. Yeah, so, this is just another example of safety planning. Some of you may be more familiar with this if you live in an area where there's a lot of water or fire or earthquakes. And unfortunately, that's becoming a lot of places rapidly. But yeah, so this is just an example of that, of some things you may need, like, food and water, like where are my batteries? What do I have an atlas? Because like there may be a situation where you don't have access to, service and such things like that, or power. So just a little food for thought. And now we're on our next slide.
Cool. So you may be asking yourself, why is this work important? And we felt it was really important to address this question because of the general ways that like care work and care specifically are conceptualized in our so-called society. This work is both for you and for your community. I can think of times in my life when I've supported people who've been out of commission because they were snatched by the state or because they were hospitalized. And the times that I've done that, that I've had a clear sense of how to proceed, what to do, it it is just like a world away from the uncertainty of being like, am I going to make a decision for my comrade or friend that they are not going to thank me for, which is a really real thing that happens a lot, unfortunately. It just like gets that, it just gets that out of the way. It provides sort of peace of mind and a material framework to reference, and very importantly, grounding during a time of high stress and uncertainty, which is also something that our so-called society like doesn't provide us a framework for. The next bullet point is care work is a collective responsibility and shouldn't be defaulted onto folks based on their gender or race. I don't think it's out of left field to say that care work is really subjugated, viewed in sort of like a derogatory way by the white cis hetero patriarchy. We have a lot to dismantle when it comes to understanding care work. Like if sexism and the patriarchy ended tomorrow, we would still need a lot of time to get over the notions that we have as a society. So we have a lot to dismantle when it comes to understanding care work sort of in an anti-oppressive context. And doing community care could be a way to prioritize this goal and to co-create more like pro-human cultures. As it stands, the way we think about care and care work is very, very broken, and it just gets defaulted, onto people based on like how society sees their gender and how society sees their race. And very importantly too, isolation is a goal of the state. It does this very, very well, and it understands, as insofar as we can assign a consciousness to the state, which is maybe a bit problematic, but it understands how to do that, and it understands that isolating people is a way to control them. We can see this in examples that range from being arrested all the way up to being incarcerated. It cannot be stressed enough how the state uses isolation and fear to torture and control folks. And hopefully the skills and practices that we'll talk about in this workshop can help minimize this form of intentional isolation. We feel like pretty strongly about this. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's
just
great.
a lot. So.
Thank you. So to echo some of the things that Amr said, so this slide is going over some reflections or provocations when thinking about isolation. So yeah, like isolation is a goal of the state. And this work is the antithesis of that. By engaging in this work, we create ways to have each other's backs, which allow for more transparency, closeness, and consent in the receiving of and giving of care. So the first bullet that we have on this slide is challenge your own internal narratives around isolating yourself. This is really important because it can be reflexive to fall back on choosing to not seek support in times of high stress. This can happen for a lot of different reasons. We may feel afraid to burden others, quote unquote, or fear, quote unquote, being too much. And we just want to remind you and ourselves that you are worthy of care. We are all inherently worthy of loving, reciprocal care and mutual respect. To accept support from others can be a humbling process, and it is also a gift to invite others to be able to show up. In the process of inviting others to support us, we also send the message to others that it is okay to do that too. And also, when we isolate ourselves, we make ourselves more vulnerable to the state because it hinders our ability to maintain that transparency with our community, which puts us and our communities at a disadvantage for having a grounded threat assessment around what tactics the state is using against us. The second bullet on this slide is challenge the reflex of assuming someone experiencing something difficult wants space or wouldn't be interested in being included in social time. So this is often something that some of us have witnessed or experienced. Sometimes when someone is going through a challenging experience, there might be the tendency to think, oh, they have a lot on their plate. They probably wouldn't want to come out, or they don't probably want to hear from me, etc. But what's happening here is if we assume what someone wants or needs, we create more distance between one another. And assumptions like this can be more about our own discomfort around a situation and less about the authentic needs of the person in crisis. Even if the person turns down an invitation to a social event, you still provided that person with a warm extension of showing you are thinking about them and giving them the option rather than not at all. So it just instills more of that agency for the other person to be able to actually speak to what their authentic needs are. And yeah, like challenging. So the last bullet on the slide is challenging harmful narratives that could further ostracize or alienate a person being targeted by the state. Some of this might look like spreading rumors, like not knowing, like speaking about things that you should not or don't know what you're actually saying, saying stuff like, oh, that person should have known better, or like, oh, I just like never really trusted that person, or like whatever, like this looks like. What we do is we are often helping the state by further alienating and isolating this person. That doesn't necessarily mean like if you do have real feelings, like, you know, of not enjoying someone, that's fine, but like maybe keep it to yourself, or like don't put it out there around the time that someone is dealing with state repression. Do you have anything to add to that particular one, Amr?
Yeah, totally. I think that also patterns of all of the, like the list of patterns of, you know, racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, homophobia, fat phobia, ableism, transphobia, and many other sort of structural oppressive structures inflect these things. And I think that interrogating that, if your comrade's being spoken of in a way that falls under like any of this stuff, like just get that shit on lock, I think, in whatever way that seems best. And strategies for doing this are manifold and can be talked out in your support group or your affinity group as well.
Yes, thank you so much for adding that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
are we ready to go to the next slide?
I think so.
Cool, let's do it. All right, so the nitty gritty, care planning, who is supporting you? This in and of itself is a really big topic and could easily be, and has been, its own workshop that has been presented in like various circles. We're going to be heavily referencing a work by Mia Mingus called Pods and Pod Mapping, which will be presented on the resources page at the end. And we're going to be showing you sort of a little image from that resource. So a care team can consist of several people with varying roles based on capacity and trust, basically. But to back up for a second, like, I want to just talk about community, like the concept of community it can be kind of a dicey one. Let's be honest. For one, the word itself can mean so many different things in different contexts. And the weight of that word can bring up all sorts of, you know, sometimes conflicting expectations. I want to quote at length from the Mia Mingus resource that I mentioned, pods and pod mapping. So here's a quote. For some, community was an overarching, oh, she's talking about, she's like doing some preliminary research in order to like figure out how people get support and support each other. And she's going around and asking like what community means to people. For some, community was an overarching term that encompassed huge numbers of people based on identity, e.g., the feminist community, while for others, community referred to a specific set of arbitrary values, practices, and/or relationships. For example, I don't know them well, but we're in community with each other. Or some defined community simply by geographic location, regardless of relationship or identity. For example, the Bay Area community or the Asheville community. We found that people romanticized community, or though they felt connected to a community at large, they only had significant and trustworthy relationships with very few actual people who may or may not be part of that community. For example, someone might feel connected to the queer community, but when asked who from that queer community they felt they could trust to show up for them in times of crisis, vulnerability, or violence, they could only name 2 or 3 people. And that's the end of the quote. I wanted to include this because this sentiment like could on its face like is maybe a little bit of a bummer, or kind of bleak. But when I read that, I kind of saw it as a provocation to get really specific about your care team. Doing this can provide you with meaningful care and follow through, which is something that's lacking sometimes, and can also expand and add facets of solidarity to your existing relationships. I want to emphasize too that making a support crew, or Mingus says pod, and she goes into that. Pod has kind of a COVID meaning, perhaps that like isn't. This was written before COVID, so that that definition didn't exist then. But she goes into why she says pod. It is absolutely not a popularity contest. It is very, very, very normal to only be able to think of like 1 to 3 people who can fill these roles for you. And yeah, I mean, like I've been an anarchist for what, 20 years, I said. I've been in Asheville for 10 years. I can probably only think of like 1 to 3 people too. So it's not, it's really normal to like have those kinds of numbers. And if you have more, that's great. That's also fine, but I do want to emphasize that it's not an indictment on you as a character or as a person if you can't think of more people. So when making your support team, ask yourself the questions: who needs to know what, and what information do you not want out there? And those are questions that only you can sort of answer for yourself. Do you have anything to add, Isaac?
Let me think for a second. No, I think that's great.
Cool.
So this is a graphic on the slide that was created by Mia Mangus. And it was designed specifically in the context of transformative justice. And for those of y'all who don't know who Mia Mangus is, she is a writer, educator, and trainer for transformative justice and disability justice. So that is like primarily where she's coming from. So this graphic we included because although it was intended for the context of transformative justice and accountability processes, it provides a good visual and a way to define the different ways a care cluster can function. Yeah, like echoing what Amr said, like this idea of care and support teams and all of that, like the way that this graphic is created, it kind of allows us to sort of think outside of what that could actually mean. And as if you can see this, I'm still going to describe it. And in this graphic, there's a center circle, and surrounding that, there's some other circles. There's 6 of them. And then outside of that, there's like plenty of others. So for those circles that are closer to the center, that would be your core team. Those people may be the ones doing some of the more intimate tasks, such as speaking with family members, providing childcare, speaking with your legal support team, visiting you in jail, etc. And as you go out from the center, the tasks may shift to less personal tasks and roles such as paying bills, helping with errands, fundraising, walking your dog, etc. Roles and capacities will shift, and using a visual like this honors that truth and can help expand our conceptualization around the different kinds of support that goes into navigating something difficult. It allows me, like, thinking about this, to think like, okay, so like I might not trust like my next door neighbor, for example, but my next door neighbor would go and check my mail and make sure to keep an eye on my place if I wasn't around, in a situation that I was not able to be there. So yeah, like that is what this is, and we are including this resource at the end of the presentation.
Cool. Oh yeah. Thanks for including some about Mia Mingus. I think she's a really like
She's so
interesting,
cool.
yeah, she's a really interesting person. So here are some things to remember if you are a support person. Supporting folks can be really difficult. It is work. It can be really difficult work, especially if you are also interfacing with like oppressive legal or medical structures. And it's good to like create sort of a community of care. And here are some ways that you might go about that. So the first way is check in on the individual or individuals you are supporting and with other support folks in meaningful ways. Really hold that sometimes they may need to talk about really difficult stuff, and we also live in a so-called society of like extreme conflict avoidance or like discomfort aversion, which has like lots and lots of roots in puritanical ethics and work ethics and white supremacy. And we're going to include a resource about learning more about that at the end of the workshop. But yeah, check in on each other in meaningful ways. Hold that people might have discomforting things to say. Ask directly about how they're doing, how they feel about their lawyer, how they feel about their support so far. So sometimes folks under state pressure feel, or who are, going through it in other ways, feel like they need to bottle up emotions or experiences and just push through, or like white knuckle it and like fake it till you make it. I think there's lots of like really cruel, almost like arbitrarily cruel aspects to white supremacy culture, and those are myriad. And one of the most cruel things is that people like need to tamp their emotions down in order to like be more productive, which is just backward in my opinion. And a simple and direct invitation to talk can really, really help a lot. It's like amazing to me. Like sometimes I feel like people are just waiting to be asked like how the fuck they're doing, and an invitation to talk can really help. And approach assessing folks' needs in a way that makes space for boundaries, both theirs and your own. And Isaac is going to talk about this more on the next slide.
Cool. Yeah, I actually just wanted to add something
Oh
to.
yeah, sorry.
No, it's totally cool. Just like to echo what you were saying about like that feeling of just like wanting to be asked like how you're doing. Like oftentimes just offering active listening and not immediately offering solutions can be really helpful. And I don't know, like so I think sometimes in as a person in a support role, we might think like, oh, I have to be like, like doing stuff and like giving things and stuff. And sometimes it's this more like quiet thing of actually just sitting with the person. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for adding that. It's vital.
Um, so just give me 1 second. Got a little tech thing going on over here. um, yeah, so offering support open-ended versus closed-ended questions. This can be really helpful to figuring out how to navigate some of the difficulties of navigating a difficult situation, not knowing like necessarily what you may want. A lot of times there's this reflex of asking like, what do you need? What would feel good to you? Or if you need anything, just let me know. This can often be really challenging for folks who don't necessarily have a clear sense of what they need. It can be really hard to know. Um, Instead, you may try and locate what you yourself have capacity for and present it such as, I see you're going through a tough time. I can bring you dinner or I can help you out with bills this month. This offers something both tangible, material, as well as honors your own abilities and limitations. Acknowledging your boundaries from the beginning is very important because this can help mitigate the possibility of burnout, which some of us are all too familiar with. And yeah, like with this too, um, sorry, I'm just looking over my notes. Yeah, these boundaries are really vital to being able to maintain compassion and presence and not offer false expectations or promises. So, like with this too, like with the offering of a closed-ended suggestion, you can say like, I can help you during the daytime because maybe you're someone who, if you stay up past a certain amount of time, like it really deeply affects your mental health, or like you have a job that you have to do that's only, happens at night or something like that. So like we can sometimes think of boundaries as like this thing that is like mean or something. I don't know. Like I think some of us might think that, especially for us who have like been raised to people please or accommodate others. But we can think about it more of like, okay, like what can I actually offer? And also like honor like what our actual capacities are. It's also important to be mindful of inflicting care, just as it is important to be checking in so it's just as important to check in with the person or the people you're supporting about their boundaries as well. Because sometimes like we may assume what the other person needs and like kind of go over the top and like, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this. And like the person's on the other side just like, whoa, 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 like slow down. So it's great to like be wonderful, caring people. And sometimes we do need to check ourselves and be like, okay, am I like kind of going over the top right now? And that like goes back to that active listening sort of thing and not always like jumping to offering solutions.
Yeah. Before we move on, I think that as our worlds are sort of changing really rapidly, it's really likely that we may need to confront the fact that our personal capacities may just like not be adequate for fully addressing the needs of comrades. And again, like this on its face is like kind of a bummer to confront, but in my opinion, like realistically and authentically showing up for folks in a way that actively banishes burnout will lead to like more sustained radical community and like more sustained rebellion, shall we say.
Yes.
Cool. So we're gonna kind of burn through this slide pretty quickly. This is just an example of what could be on your crisis plan. This is like a little bit geared towards political or state repression and is not super geared towards like a medical paradigm. We're gonna be making uh, this available to you so that you can edit it as best fits your needs. So this list is not meant to be like prescriptive, but is meant to outline some like logistical concerns that folks may face when they're arrested. Like Isaac said before, it also needs to be said that like the dubious luxury of being somewhat certain if, when, and where you may be arrested is not something that is afforded to everyone at all times. This can be for many reasons. Say if you're part of a demographic of people who are policed more than others, or if you have warrants out, or if you are homeless, etc. So it's good to like keep this stuff in mind in like less crisis oriented scenarios. So the first point that we drafted up is emergency contacts. This is pretty self-explanatory, who to contact in case of an emergency. 2 is lawyer, legal support, and jail support. So if you have a lawyer in mind, memorize their name or the lawyer's business, or have the lawyer's business card in your wallet, and get that number of the lawyer to your emergency contact. 3 is personal or home life. This can, you know, the sky's the limit really. Childcare, animal care, plant care, car or house sitting. This can also be geared toward home security, comrades, like posting up at your house if that's what's needed. Talking to family and friends. This is a really important point that was gone over extensively in part 1 of this workshop series. Really briefly, it's just how to talk to your family, your apolitical or non-political family or friends about what you're going through in the event that you can't do it yourself. What are your boundaries? What are your parameters? Those kinds of things. Safe houses. Where could you go to be safe if your house isn't an option? You'll note that I have a star by that. I'm gonna like talk about that a little bit later. Job loose ends. Either letting a trusted coworker know part of what's going on or having a trusted friend be able to contact your job in case that you can't do it. Medications, number 7, medications, where they live. They need to be in a bottle with the script label on them, unfortunately. Number 8 is securing items. So any items that you want secured that you think may be in danger. Asking someone to help with that is really good. So like, for example, my really cool book collection could get destroyed by the pigs. Is it cool to store at your place for a while? That kind of thing. Communication also has a star by it. Again, I'm going to go over that later. Number 1 on this list is tech security, and this was gone over very extensively in the last workshop. But just to reiterate a few like salient points, having really good passcodes on your phone, not leaving your passwords accessible to folks that they shouldn't be seeing, not having devices on your person if risk of arrest is imminent. But if you do, since folks can't always determine when and where they'll be arrested, and honestly, like sometimes people just have their phones on them and it's just a reality. Having your phone passcoded or encrypted at all times. Code words, which can be a little goofy, like a little bit of a like goofy exercise to run up against, but it's really nice to have a kind of code language for speaking in front of people who don't have your best interests in mind. So like For example, you could say like, if I text you, if I say the package has arrived, it means there's a cop outside the door or something like that. This is it's these are only really useful if this is something that you never say. So like for my own life, I'd be like, I had a really great talk with my mom yesterday. That could mean I'm in really, really big trouble because that like literally never happens for me. Um, Times in my life when I've had coded language to talk in front of police or in front of unfriendly people has been like not life-saving, but it's generally been like a really good thing that feels great to have in place. Um, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, yeah, this is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next on the list is bills. What needs to get paid, when, where's the money, who will do it? 11 is post-release or jail support plan being set up ahead of time. So just like the question in a jail support form, like what kind of care or items might you need when you're out? Do you want a cigarette immediately? Do you want beer immediately? What would you like while inside? What don't you want to happen? Meal planning, grocery shopping. Will you need help eating and staying nourished? Explicitly naming vulnerabilities based on race, transness, fatness, disabilities, class, addiction, etc. So like we said before, like we're probably aware that any vulnerabilities like are magnified and distorted sometimes in ways that are really strange or difficult to predict when the state or the police are involved. They just make everything worse. It's often super scary to be like in a context where you don't know where shit's going to come at you from. And it's really important to talk this through with your comrades and support folks. And last on the list is fundraising. Do you want it? How do you want it done? Depending on the situation, you may need to coordinate this with your with any potential defendants or with your lawyer. So to go back to the starred areas, those are, oh, let's go to the next slide actually. Oh, actually, let's stay on this slide. So when I go to the document that we made with this list on it, you'll notice that those two starred areas are not on that list. And that's for the simple reason that it's better to communicate those aspects word of mouth, because it's not great to have like such sensitive information laying around written down. Okay, now we're ready for the next slide.
Thank you. That was such a chunky slide. So yeah, so who has access to this document? Where does it live? Is it an encrypted link, like such as like RiseUp Pad or CryptPad? You can make one at pad.riseup.net, for example, or is it in a sealed envelope in a top secret location that only your primary emergency support person or contact knows about? Yeah, so this is really important because if you're going to go through all the work of filling out that big list, you got to decide where you want it to live and think about the security of that. And so this is the template that we've created for y'all. If you want to screenshot that, we also are going to include, actually, I don't know if we are, but if y'all want like to have this document emailed to you, you can maybe reach out to us and we'll share our contact email at the end.
Yeah.
But this is the template that you can fill out and alter and modify to whatever ways that you feel like it is applicable to you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. So this next slide is, well, actually, maybe this is a good moment since we've been talking for a long time. If y'all just like want to take like, 60 seconds or so, just to like stretch, maybe 30 seconds, just drink some water. before we get into this next section, because it kind of covers totally different part of your brain, I think, in my opinion. So let's just take a moment, stretch and breathe. So Amr and I are going to share the next couple slides, I think.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much to say and we both care about this stuff so much. Care about all of it. So this is the emotional first aid and self-regulation slide. On the first bullet, we have mental preparation for going into an encounter with the state. So what does this look like? It's basically trying to set aside some time to like actually run through in your mind, like what would that look like, and you could play out some of those like worst case scenarios. But you could also like just try to maybe like talk to seasoned comrades about like their interactions with the state and their experiences with that. If you know folks that have faced state repression, and maybe you don't know those people, maybe that looks like doing some research or reading or reaching out to see if there's other folks that may be in a similar position. Some of the work of doing this mental preparation is acknowledging the scary reality that cops are violent, trained to bully, lie, and manipulate. They literally go to school for these things. So acknowledging that reality so that you can mentally prepare yourself for the possibility of that encounter. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, that's great.
So if that didn't already get you a little jazzed, we're going into what is that? Was that feeling that you may be experiencing? Adrenalized thinking. Adrenalized thinking can affect our ability to perform basic cognitive tasks. This basically is like, our bodies get flooded with these chemicals when we have our sympathetic system activated. And it is for purely for like our own survival that this happens. We may find ourselves feeling really jazzed and excited, not necessarily in a good way. Like that, you might find yourself with a lot more energy. This is known as the fight response. You might feel yourself starting to want to run away. That's the flight response. You might find yourself freezing like a deer in the headlights, and that is the freeze response. There's several other kinds of adrenalized responses that we're not going to go over today because this is basically just a one-on-one. But it is helpful to familiarize yourself with the kinds of responses that you may have when you are experiencing that adrenaline flush, or like the kind of sensations your body may experience if you are undergoing some sort of acute stress. This can help us with that mental preparation piece, because if we are familiarizing ourselves with like what those sensations are, then we can feel more mentally prepared for what may happen in the moment. Because if you're feeling like, oh, like, I know that I have a freeze response, and you familiarize yourself with that, by doing that preparatory work, you may actually be able to have a little bit more agency in acknowledging like, okay, so I'm going into this stress response. I'm familiar with it. This is not permanent. And just basically doing that piece of that preparatory work. You want to go over the next?
Yeah. So breath work is really interesting. Breath is a thing we need to live. We need ideally at least like 1 or 2 breaths a second. And it's really incredible how often people will hold their breath or like breathe very shallowly for like extended periods of time and just like kind of not realize they're doing it. There is one technique that we wanted to go over for like a really good way of calming, centering. It can interrupt the mechanism of an anxiety attack or panic attack. And that's called Samavriti, or if you want to be fancy, Samavriti Pranayama, or equal breath. This is also known as box breathing or square breathing, which the Navy SEALs are very popular for sort of spearheading or like using. And I say that, and other military entities as well. And I say that not to like imbue this technique with some kind of value by proxy, by placing it in proximity to the military, but because sometimes I see people talk about box breathing as something that the Navy SEALs invented, and no, it's like a millennia's old technique that comes from many places, and one of those places that we can locate is in yoga. And we're gonna like go through a little exercise on the next slide. Is there anything else you want to say about breathing?
Yeah, just like intentional. I love what you said. The bringing intention to your breath is just one of those things that can help you bring yourself to your body and where you are.
Yeah.
Which also includes our voice. So that's something that I often find myself doing and have been practicing during this presentation of slowing down my speech pattern, consciously changing the volume of your voice, like making yourself sound a little quieter or talking really loud. This can bring attention to where we are, that vibrations that are coming from your voice box can be a really centering thing for us. And this can also include humming. And this is also a tool, just like breathing, that anyone can do, like wherever you are. And that's like one of the beautiful things about these kinds of techniques is that you don't need to like buy fancy shit or like take some sort of like class or like have, like some fancy like tool or whatever. Like we have the ability to do that ourselves with our bodies in the moment. So at the bottom of this slide, we have, or do you have anything to say?
That's great.
Okay. At the bottom of the slide, we have the suggested practice of familiarizing yourself of where you hold tension, where you hold joy, as well as neutral sensations. And that goes back a little bit to that second bullet point, which is like familiarize yourself, like when you are having like a really good time, like maybe you're hanging out with like one of your closest friends and y'all are laughing, like where in your body, where are you feeling those sensations? Like are you feeling like kind of like a lightness in your chest, or like if you are feeling some level of stress, like do you clench your jaw? Are your shoulders like sort of crawling up to like your ears? And like these more neutral sensations of just, like, okay, like I'm waiting, for a ride, and like I can just like think about like my feet and like my feet, what are my feet doing? And these, like, just familiarizing yourself with this can allow you, these provide internal references, especially like considering like those joyful experiences, like those, like the sensation of like pleasant sensation can be something that in a stressful situation you can think about. Oh yeah, like I remember when I was with my friend the other day, like I really felt like I could breathe. And so like if you're coming into a situation that's really frightening, like trying to like remember like, oh, it felt so good to laugh with that person the other day. And I'm just gonna bring that a little bit into this moment.
I love that.
And I also just wanted to add to that, it's good to like try to practice these techniques like when you're actually feeling pretty decent. Like it helps to allow you to not just do this like in stressful situations, because that builds that muscle memory. But it's also like then you have this like positive association of like I do this like, you know, whether I'm feeling bad, whether I'm feeling good, whether I'm feeling like that sort of middle neutral sort of thing, which kind of just like is that echoing of the suggested practice as well.
I love that. So we don't have the option to do breakout rooms in this workshop, which is totally okay, but I wanted to just, we wanted to present this image for kind of a visualization of the box breathing technique or samavriti. And maybe we can like all do it together real fast just to see how it feels. Now you'll notice that like as part of this practice, you hold your breath. And I want to emphasize that if it doesn't feel safe for you to do that, that is totally okay. If it does feel safe to you to do that, you won't run out of air. This is not meant to like be an endurance exercise or anything like that. It's meant to activate the like calming. It's meant to like calm your nervous system and to sort of like interrupt anxiety or interrupt panic. So to do this, you want to like sit up as tall as feels good to you, but don't like strain your back or anything. So you'll inhale sort of on a count to 4. So inhale 2, 3, 4, and then hold 2, 3, 4. Exhale 2, 3, 4. Rest 2, 3, 4, and repeat. I love this technique. I use it probably 5 or 6 times a day. And yeah, I really love it as a way to sort of calm and center. And it's a really great, it's free. You don't need nothing to do it except yourself.
I also do it like so many times during the day.
Incredible. Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much for doing that. I always feel so much better when I do that. So on this slide, we have a continuation. Our first bullet is neutral body point check-in. So that was like going back to what I was talking about before. For a lot of us, including myself, you know, bringing attention to our bodies may be uncomfortable. I am someone that deals with body dysphoria. So something that's nice about this neutral body check-in is that I don't have to, I can think of like something like my toes or like my shoulders or wherever like may not have an association that brings a sense of discomfort or dysphoria to. And it's also like helpful because if you are thinking about a place that's not necessarily experiencing sensation or pain, like you can kind of bring your attention to this like blankness, and it can be like a really grounding thing to do. So like, yeah, like what are my toes doing right now? Like, how do they feel? Are they sweaty? Like, are they dry? Do they feel like tense? What are they, am I able to wiggle them? And like, and the thing that's nice about like checking in with, you know, like something like this is like, you could just do that and no one's going to even know that you're doing it. Like you could do the same thing with your hand. Whatever neutral body point that you can identify that works for you. Because we're, you know, whatever works for you because you're your own expert. The second bullet is situational awareness.
Yeah. Situational awareness can be really, really important in a stressful situation. If you feel your brain is spiraling in ways that you don't want it to spiral, or you feel like you're out of control with your thoughts, a really nice way to bring your brain back into your body is to just notice what's around you. So there's a red chair, there's a brown dog, and there's a blue lamp. Doing this over and over again with different aspects of the room that you're in or the environment that you're in can be a really, really nice way to also like activate those like calming mechanisms in your body. We have infinity gaze written here. I think that that's referring to like like a soft, unfocused gaze that you can practice if the like five senses exercise is not going well for you. Um,
Basically with the infinity gaze, it's like, yeah, it's like doing that, like sort of softening the way that your eyes are looking at something, and bringing your eyes like on it, like think of an eight flipped on its side, like horizontally, and having
mm,
your eyes following that eight shape. And one of the nice things about this that you can use also like in other contexts, if you were trying to make yourself, more present and aware of your space and the environment, is your eyes aren't getting locked on one location,
mhm.
which for some of us who are familiar with dissociating or getting stuck in a freeze state, that can happen. So in doing this, we are like allowing our eyes to follow this eight. We're getting our foreground, like our periphery, the background, and what's in our middle ground. And I find it really helpful to do like while I'm doing breath work.
I didn't know about that. That I learned something too. Um, the last point that we have on this slide is the point of spiritual solidarity. Do you have a connection to legacies of resistance and liberation, or people, either living or dead, who embody aspects that are aspirational or inspirational to you? Or perhaps you have a memory of feeling this sensation of connectedness and embodiment of your values. This is a really powerful thing to keep in mind in situations that are less than ideal. And it's a really powerful thing to keep in mind in general, and really moving to keep in mind as well. Um, the reminder that you're part of a legacy, that you're um, uh, yeah, what are some stories of resistance that provide strength to you? Who are some of your comrades that you look at and you're like, I really admire this person. I'm so like happy that we're friends. I'm so happy that we're in struggle together. Um, what what in your life, what in your tradition helps you feel that sense of interconnectedness and that sense of like not being alone in struggle? I feel like there's a lot more to say about that. Do you have anything to add, Isaac?
Um, yeah, this is like a really special thing that I find like something that I use like a lot, just in life too, and in the times that I've been facing state violence or like incarceration, um, I found it to be something that's really like provided a sense of like armor, like something that is both like humbling and allowing, like, and in that humbling, like has helped me to ground myself, but also maintain the sense of like really fierce strength, knowing that I am a part of this thing that is so much larger than myself. Um, and I encourage like when you are thinking about this, which is a part of our suggested activity, to if you were, yeah, I guess we could just talk about the suggested activity. So like when you think about like who your chosen radical ancestors are, or historical moments, or comrades that provide strength, sharing that with a loved one or like journaling about it. Yeah, just like think about like what makes you feel that sense of like, fuck yeah, like I'm a part of this, like this something so much larger than myself.
Mhm.
um
That's great.
yeah.
It's great to journal about it as well. So I guess this goes into what we were talking about before with the mental preparation for going into an encounter with the state. Um, some things, this is called activation and triggers that may come up slash what are yours. Some things that can come up when facing the cops or the state: being gaslit, being insulted or hurt. Identifying what may come up for you in this vein may make you more prepared for this encounter. And if you take absolutely nothing else away from this workshop, this would be the thing to take away, which is the police can do and will lie to you. They will also try to manipulate you, and internalizing this is central to safety in a repression context. I often think about, when I think about the police, I think about, and this is like the tinfoil hat is descending, so strap in, y'all, get ready. I think that the police has an extremely effective propaganda machine in like popular culture. And I'm not even talking about how they're viewed socially. So like there's the pop culture construction of like, oh, this is the good cop and they're like fighting the good fight and doing justice and all that stuff. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking procedurally. So like, I don't know about y'all, but anecdotally, I've never heard of anybody being read their Miranda rights. I've never heard about anybody getting their fucking phone call. I've never heard about anybody like getting procedural things that are commonly shown in pop culture regarding the police. Maybe that does happen and I'm just not aware of it. I'd love to be proven wrong about this, but I live in hope, but I'm like not too much. I'm not holding my breath or nothing. But yeah, I mean, just like thinking about the cops, just being like, you just cannot trust them. Like they're not here to help. They're not here. They're not going to make anything better. Some may look like, or like want you to think that they're going to like make you feel safe or like whatever, but like no, it's just not the case, and this can be shown time and time again. And just like thinking about in yourself, like what will come up in this vein for you if you can mentally, and I know it's not like nice to do this because it's not nice to put yourself mentally in like uncomfortable situations, but this kind of preparatory work in case shit can be really, really good for just making you feel more prepared, is all. So I love this slide so much. For those of y'all at home, it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer looking really fierce with a sword and a clove of garlic.
Yeah, so here we have Buffy and she wants to do this role play with you. So since we can't do breakout groups tonight, this is a suggested scenario activity that you can do with a friend. It's a role play. So person one would be acting as the cop and person two would be acting as themselves. Person one knocks on the quote unquote door and demands to speak with you. What do you do? Practice grounding techniques of your choice while doing this exercise. Notice what sensations come up. And remember the quote unquote magic words. I am going to remain silent. I would like to speak with my lawyer. So this is bringing some of those skills that we have talked about and into this is, this is a good way of trying to actually like, feel those sensations and familiarize yourself with like, oh God, like I totally like forgot what to say, or like I felt like I lost my ability to speak, or I found myself really angry. And like obviously the more real you make the scenario, the more likely you will be able to like actually experience a little bit of that genuine like stress response. But even just doing it like silly with friends, which I've done before, like we have found ourselves like feeling our stress responses because it's a fucking shitty situation to be role playing. So just remember that Buffy's got your back.
Yes, she does. Some words on like the magic words choice that we included. We're calling these words magic not because we want to suggest that uttering them will like cast a spell that will immediately banish the state or the police, but more so just as a mnemonic. It is really likely and probable that if you're in this situation, you'll need to say this phrase over and over and over again, um, because they're just not going to listen. But it legally means something. And I like to think about it as in the context of boundary setting. So like when you set a boundary, 5% of the work is setting the boundary initially, and 95% of the work is maintaining it.
Mm.
So you just need to like iterate it over and over and over again. But just, I'm going to remain silent. I would like to speak with my lawyer. And it's going to feel silly, but it's the thing. It's the thing to do in this case. So our final reflection, and this, we are winding down this workshop. But when you are doing this suggested scenario, you are your own expert. Take some time to gently think about what might come up in dealing with a knock, etc. Write down some of your known activation points and or triggers that may come up. You can journal or confide in a trusted friend. What are some things you think you can do, or what has helped in the past? This is a great exercise to do. This can take the form of like group or self-reflection. Make time either for yourself to meditate on this topic, or make space in groups with your affinity group or friend group or support group to discuss and process these topics. It can be really emotionally intense to engage in this exercise, so just take care of yourself and others when doing so, because it can be really painful to think about times where you were really harmed or you were really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things, what are some coping mechanisms? Yeah. Who are some people, or what are some activities that provide comfort and distraction? And that's the like, the nice thing to think about in this scenario. Like, what are things that you've done in the past that have made you feel really safe or seen or heard or comforted or just fucking distracted? Like, there is a lot of value in naming that for yourself. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I guess I was just gonna emphasize, like it says on the slide, to like include maybe some of these coping mechanisms, and that's bringing in some of that like emotional mental health crisis planning into like this context. Is it can be really helpful to like share with your trusted support folks, like what are those activities that provide comfort and distraction. If you were not incarcerated and you were able to like do so with folks outside, or also like other things that may help you when if you are incarcerated. So those are things that you may find helpful to include on that form.
Thank you so much for being here, y'all.
Yeah.
This went a little bit longer than we had originally intended, but hopefully the information we discussed is helpful for you. This shit's really fucking hard. And if you're being targeted by the state or the police, it's not your fault. It's their fault, really. And hopefully this was helpful in dealing with this like really uncertain and frightening experience. We have some shared resources that I think we can drop them in the chat, but we're going to go through them just really briefly, just so that you can get like a little bit of a context for why we have shared the resources we do. I don't have any future events to plug, do you?
I don't think I do either.
Cool.
But keep your ears posted.
Cool. And for the Q&A, like Ash said in the beginning, we'll do it through the Q&A feature. I haven't really been keeping eyes on it, but I'll look at it here in a few seconds. Just to reiterate that we're not lawyers or therapists or experts or professionals or medical doctors or anything. we're just people and we can like answer stuff to the best of our ability and like from our own subjectivities, but shouldn't be taken as like this is what you should do. These are all just like soft suggestions. So before we get into the Q&A, I just wanted to like look at the resources list really quick. The first source is the zine from the very first workshop in this series, which you can find at the Blue Ridge ABC Black Blogs site. That's the Blue Ridge Anarchist Black Cross, which is a local group here in town. The next resource is Tima Okun's The Characteristics of White Supremacy Culture. This was written in 1999, but it is like very, very poignantly relevant today. I really, really recommend this resource. It like goes through the characteristics of white supremacy culture, breaks it down into a bulleted point list, and like explains how it manifests, and it's really eye-opening. I really recommend it.
And it's something that you can like always go back to and continue to just take so much from.
And it's available for free online, and it's part of a larger work, which is the Dismantling Racism, a workbook for social change groups, which is written by various authors. There is Mia Mingus's Pods and Pod Mapping worksheet, which is really great, and I highly recommend everybody read it as soon as they can. What's the Bay Area? Bay Area BAT
Transformative Justice Committee, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
I think.
Next is the Fireweed Collective's Emotional Crisis Toolkit. This is formerly known as the Icarus Project. This next resource is a podcast called Maintenance Phase Podcast, and it's just great for developing tools for confronting fat phobia in communities. And this is from a queer, anti-capitalist, anti-racist, methodological, and fat liberation lens. And that's with Aubrey Gordon and Michael Hobbs. And the last is an easy 6-step somatic exercise to process triggers, which is at integrativepsych.co. We can drop these in the chat. So that's it, y'all.
Thanks y'all so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Do we just leave?
I think we just leave.
Bye. Okay. Bye, y'all. Yeah, let us know what you thought, and stay safe out there, and take care of each other, and take care of yourself, and that's it. Okay. Bye.